NBC News can now project that Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, which means he is the winner of this race and will return to the White House as this country's 47th president. And for so many of you watching right now, that news is, to say the least, a lot to digest. I understand that personally. After he lost 4 years ago, he refused to accept the outcome and incited a violent insurrection on our nation's capital. He's campaigned while facing criminal indictments related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 results, and he's run as a convicted felon. During this campaign, he has also promised to essentially be an authoritarian leader, to use power like no American president ever has before, and wield that power to go after his political enemies. This is a man who's also bragged about overturning Roe v. Wade and stripping away women's bodily autonomy. He's promised to conduct mass deportations to crack down on the rights of millions of Americans. Donald Trump is an anti-democratic force, but he's just been elected democratically in our country.
Gang, it's time to pour ourselves a cup of liberal tears. And, I want to actually use this golden opportunity to gloat as a learning opportunity. We're going to see how much the woke meltdowns actually end up inadvertently admitting who woke liberals really are. And thus, they only end up ultimately implicating themselves in their own defeat. I think you're going to really like this. Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your patron professor, in search of a new moniker. I'm no longer here to keep you sane in these insane times because the rays of sanity have dawned upon our nation, all thanks to you and your tireless efforts at making number 45 number 47. You, gang, have awakened an epic and historic moment in our nation, and I'm forever grateful to you for restoring sanity to our nation. Gang, as you know, we look out for each other on this channel. Your safety and your security are our number one priority. So if you haven't secured the deed to your home as of yet, you need to click on that link below right now and protect yourself and your loved ones. I was absolutely shocked when I found out how easy it is to access the deed to my house, and not just access it, but actually change it. The deed to your home is the only document that proves you own it. But the problem is that all our deeds are now online, and criminals are free to find your deed, forge your signature, refile as the new homeowner, take out tons of loans using your home's equity, and then they stick you with all the debt. But that's where our good friends over at Home Title Lock come in. Gang, they're simply amazing. Home Title Lock gives you the peace of mind that the deed to your home is absolutely and completely protected 24/7. Click on that link below right now. Use promo code TurleyTalks. Then all you got to do is enter your address for your no-obligation home title scan to see if you've already been a victim of deed theft. It's a $100 value, absolutely totally free with my promo code TurleyTalks. Gang, don't wait for the worst to happen only to regret you didn't do something about it when you could have. Do what I've done. Do what countless patriots have done. Click on that link below right now and secure your home today. MSNBC's Mika Brzezinski is in mourning this morning. She's wearing all black today. She's wearing black to mourn the death of her woke identity politics. And Joe Scarborough tried to deliver the eulogy.
I just say really quickly, too, Democrats need to be mature, and they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men, things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman as president of the United States. You know, the Democratic Party, I've always found when you're sitting around talking, they love to just sort of balkanize everybody into these separate groups and say, oh, white people don't like women and black people. No, it is time for the Democrats to say, okay, and you and I have talked about this before, a lot of Hispanic voters have problems with black candidates.
Right.
A lot
and
of,
with other Hispanics. You've got some that don't like each other. And some of the most misogynist things I've heard going on this Get Out the Vote tour came from black men. I mean, misogynist things. So you're absolutely right. It's not simplistic, and we've got to have real, honest conversations about it.
Real, honest conversations.
Yeah, I can assure you, I can absolutely assure you that honest conversations will be the last thing you hear among our woke elite. Again, I mean, we weren't even seconds out from that election being called last night for Trump before the tiniest minds on our planet, with the most myopic frames of reference, began blaming the demons of racism and sexism, their very own demons, for the loss of what was objectively one of the worst-run presidential campaigns ever. Now, the problem with this, and you'll notice, is that they're actually admitting their own prejudice. That's what Joe Scarborough was doing. That's what Al Sharpton was doing. They were admitting their own prejudice, their own bigotry. Right? The problem with our nation today is not the establishment. It's not a corrupt, rotten elite that tried to select and force the single most incompetent rube on the planet into the presidency. It's not them. No, the problem is you. You are the problem. You are the racist. You are the misogynist. Scarborough and Sharpton are openly admitting their own narrow-minded chauvinisms, their own disdain and vitriol against we, the people. And they don't even see it. Having been utterly blinded by their own woke absurdities, they can't even see it. Speaking of woke absurdities, how can we have a special of liberal media meltdowns without the gift that never fails to keep on giving, MSNBC's Joy Reid?
Black voters came through for Kamala Harris. White women voters did not. That is what it appears happened in that state, is that if you can't flip enough white women, and we've talked about this on this set numerous times, is that you have a state where you've got a 6-week abortion or a 12-week abortion. I think theirs might be 12 weeks.
Yep.
But it's a state where women lost their reproductive rights, where there was a very heavy push to get women to focus on not putting in place, re-electing, putting back into the White House the person who was responsible for taking those rights away and restoring them. But that message obviously was not enough to get enough white women to vote for Vice President Harris, a fellow woman. This will be the second opportunity that white women in this country have to change the way that they interact with the patriarchy. And, God bless Shannon Watts, who has tried to have that conversation. But if people aren't receptive to it, and if people vote more party line or more on race than on gender and on protecting their gender, there's really not much more that you can do but tell people what the risks are and leave it to them to do the right thing.
So now it is white women. According to Joy Reid, the problem is white women. I mean, they can't even agree as to which group they want to call out. These identity politics woke messes. The insanity knows no end. So one side of the woke thinks it's misogynist black men and Latinos, and then the other side, the woke, think it's white women. Needless to say, the borderline illiterates at The View aren't taking this too well.
I'm surprised at the result, but I'm not surprised. As a woman of color, I was so hopeful that a mixed-race woman married to a Jewish guy could be elected president of this country. Mm-hmm. And I think that it had nothing to do with policy. I think this was a referendum of cultural resentment in this country.
Well, I think it...
Once again, you notice the same pattern here, right? What's the pattern? What are you catching? This is fun, isn't it? The problem isn't the managerial class. The problem is not an aloof, out-of-touch elite, an incompetent and wasteful federal bureaucracy that's unleashed unprecedented inflation upon us. No. The problem is you. You are the most resentful people on the planet are accusing you of resentment. Not to be outdone, the radical leftist Washington Post contributor Jonathan Capehart was livid last night. Here's a PBS version of a woke meltdown.
There's a shift right, and then there's a shift to Trump, and shifting to Trumpism. And, I'm looking at a lot of things, especially after David talked about looking at counties and, how Trump is gaining on what he did in 2020. And to me, I'm mystified in some ways, simply because we're talking about a twice impeached, 4 times indicted, convicted on 34 felony counts former president. That's one bucket. Then in another bucket, you have all of the things he's been saying on the campaign trail that gets to the decency that the woman was talking about in that last report, and how she wanted to vote for Vice President Harris because she didn't like that Madison Square Garden rally. I am mystified that despite all of that, he's gaining support compared to 2020. And it gets back to something I said earlier at some point, one of the hours ago, that who are we as a country? And we're starting to find out. And from what I'm seeing right now, I'm not sure I like it.
Well, here, let me help dispel this mystery for you, given your inane lack of self-reflection. It's actually very simple if you want to remove your woke blinders. No one bought the lawfare. How's that? Did that even... No, of course it didn't. No, of course it didn't. No one bought the lawfare. No one outside of your psychotic sycophants that inside your radically leftist echo chamber. No one bought it. You were selling, and no one bought. How long do you plan on doubling down on stupid? I mean, the more indictments, the more mugshots, the more felony charges, the more convictions, the more people rallied around him. Why? Because they're evil? No. Because they don't effing believe you. Because they recognize that all of that lawfare is simply using the legal system as a retributive weapon against your political enemies. And you and the press, you and the legacy media are supposed to be there to speak truth to power, and instead you become a pathetic, pandering, propagandistic mouthpiece for that power. You on your little high horse. And so that leads to your second point of mystification. This point about decency. Decency. Let me enlighten you here. I know this is going to be hard for you at PBS to even comprehend what I'm saying here. But let me try. For tens of millions of Americans across this country, hardworking Americans, Americans that have far more integrity in their pinky than you have in your entire body, who pay their taxes, who obey the law, there's only one thing that's more indecent than weaponizing the legal system against your political enemies. Do you know what that is? Your cowardliness in failing to stand up against it. Decency? You? Casting that stone? The conservative commentator Kristen Rosen was on a podcast this morning. It may have been taped last night, but she had an excellent observation. She basically said that yesterday, the American people, she says, they chose basic BS over blatant lying. So, in other words, what she's drawing from is the paradigm that Selena Zito, the New York Post, the observation she made, a brilliant observation she made about 8 years ago, where she said that the difference between Trump supporters and Trump haters, particularly in the legacy media, is that Trump supporters take him seriously, but not literally, right? They know he's a real estate salesman. I mean, Greg Gutfeld was just saying this a couple of weeks back, right? Trump supporters are fully aware of how a real estate salesman talks, right? Isn't this the most beautiful house you've ever seen? This is beautiful. It's the most beautiful. Look at that staircase. There's never been a staircase like that. Look at this neighborhood. Is this not the best? This is by far the best, most immaculate neighborhood. You're never going to see a better neighborhood. They know inflated language. They know exaggeration. They take him seriously, not literally. Whereas Trump's haters, his detractors, what? They take him literally, not seriously. Isn't that a brilliant distinction? They think he's a delusional clown precisely because they take his inflated words literally. But what Kristen Rosen pointed out, and I think this is absolutely brilliant, is that yesterday, tens of millions of people expressed something unequivocally. They recognize that this permanent political class of which the legacy media is a part, the legacy media is the mouthpiece of the establishment. They don't speak truth to power. That's the purpose of the press as the fourth branch of government. It's part of the balance of powers. You're supposed to speak truth to power. No, they don't do that. They're the mouthpiece of the establishment. Tens of millions of people recognize that when that mouthpiece actually claims Bidenomics is working, actually has the goal to claim that this is the best economy we've ever had, actually claims that violent crime is going down or that our southern border is secure, they recognize that's not hyperbole. Tens of millions of Americans recognize that that is not exaggeration. They recognize that is out and out lying. That is malicious establishment lies. And then to make it even worse, these legacy media sycophants, they cover up those lies by threatening to punish you if you stand up and call out those lies. You're the problem. You're the liar. You're the spreader of disinformation. You're the reality denier. That is the essence of this sick, psychopathic, psychotic managerial class. They lie, and then they accuse us of spreading misinformation when we call them out on it. And yesterday, tens of millions of Americans, that what we're calling the normie realignment, check out my first video today on to expand on that. Tens of millions of Americans rose up. Americans, as you heard, of every race, of every creed, of every color, of every gender, of every class, of every region, stood up and said, we know the difference between exaggeration and blatant malicious lying, and you, the permanent political class, are liars. You are liars, and we're done with you. I think that was some pretty brilliant analysis from that podcast. People can recognize the difference between basic BS, as she put it, hyperbolic exaggeration, and blatant and nefarious and malicious lying, and they voted accordingly. Now, I'm under no illusions that our woke, rotting establishment is going to be doing anything even remotely akin to self-reflection and introspection, coming to terms with how their own fraud, their own indecencies, their own vitriolic resentments, their own bigotries contributed to a massive uprising against them yesterday. They're too narcissistic. They're too psychopathic, too psychotic to even come close to that kind of self-evaluation. But the good news is it doesn't matter. It does look like we're finally seeing the beginning of the end of one of the most bizarre and frankly tragic chapters in this nation's history. It really does look like we are seeing the end of the woke left. And that end, as far as I'm concerned, as far as tens of millions of Americans are concerned, couldn't come soon enough.